I always believed children were a mirror of their parents. Their habits, their fears, their dreams reflections of what they see in us. But that belief shattered the night I heard my 8-year-old son whispering in his sleep in Latin. We're not Catholic. We don't speak Latin. No one in our family ever has. At first I thought it was gibberish. Just a child mumbling nonsense in a dream. But when I recorded it and played it back the next morning, something about it sent shivers down my spine. It was too rhythmic, too deliberate. Like a prayer. Or a warning. Then came the drawings. He started sketching the same house over and over. A tall, narrow structure with blackened windows and a red door always the same shape, the same eerie details. The worst part? He called it by name. Domus Cruenta, the bloody house. I laughed it off at first. Kids are creative, right? Until one day, I was scrolling online, trying to prove to myself that it was just his imagination, and there it was. The house. Exactly as he drew it. Real. Abandoned. Located in a town we'd never visited, hours away from us. My heart dropped. How could he possibly know what it looked like? When I asked him about it, his face turned pale. He whispered, "That's where I used to live before I came to you." Then he smiled. But it wasn't my son's smile. It was someone else's. My name is Amar, and for the longest time, my life was simple quiet even. I was a single mom, living in a sleepy little suburb just outside Portland. After my divorce, I poured every bit of myself into raising my son, Eli. He was my everything, my reason, my joy, my anchor in the storm that had been my marriage. Eli was always different. Not in a bad way, just gentle, observant. He noticed things most adults didn't. He'd point out shapes in the clouds I could never see, or hum along to songs he'd heard only once. He never liked loud noises or crowds, preferred his books over screens. He was sensitive, kind, and sometimes said things that made him seem wise beyond his years. Everyone said he was an old soul. I used to laugh when they said that. Now, I don't. After the divorce, I did everything I could to make sure Eli felt safe. We moved into a modest 2-bedroom house with a little backyard where he could play. I painted his room in soft blue, his favorite color, and hung glow-in-the-dark stars on his ceiling. Every night, I'd tuck him in with a story, kiss his forehead, and whisper, "You're safe. Mama's here." And every time, he'd whisper back, "I know. You came back for me." I thought it was just a sweet thing kids say. Until it wasn't. We had our routines. Waffles on Sundays. Stargazing on the roof in summer. 2 truths and a wish before bedtime. And in all of it, I never questioned anything. Not his odd little habits. Not his fascination with old architecture and languages. Not even the way he hated mirrors. I thought I knew my son, but I was wrong. The first time I heard him speak Latin in his sleep, I told myself it was a fluke. Maybe something he picked up on YouTube or from a book I didn't notice. But when it kept happening night after night, I started to feel it. That icy grip of something you can't name, wrapping around your chest. Still, I didn't tell anyone. How could I? I was the rational one. The single mom who handled everything home. Work. Parenting. I didn't believe in ghosts or past lives or demonic nonsense. But Eli did. One evening, while we were coloring together, he looked up and asked, "Mama, do you remember the fire?" I froze. "What fire, baby?" "The one that took us away. In the red room, before we came here." He said it so casually, like he was talking about a trip to the park. I laughed it off. Changed the subject. But something inside me cracked open. That night, I stayed up researching. Latin phrases, dream studies, children who claim to remember past lives. I fell into a rabbit hole I didn't know how to crawl out of. But I wasn't ready to believe it. Not yet. Not until Eli showed me that drawing. The house. And called it by a name that still makes my skin crawl, Domus Cruenta. That was the beginning of everything unraveling. It was a Thursday night ordinary in every way. Eli was upstairs, humming as he drew in his sketchbook like he always did. I was in the kitchen, scrolling through my phone absentmindedly, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. But something felt off. I couldn't explain it. Just a heaviness in the air, like the pressure before a storm. I walked up the stairs slowly, peeking into his room. There he was sitting cross-legged on his bed, eyes wide open, sketching furiously. He didn't even look up when I spoke. "Eli, baby, it's almost bedtime." He didn't respond. "Eli?" Still nothing. His pencil moved fast, almost frantic. I took a step closer and that's when I saw it. The page was covered in the same house again. But this time, there was more. Figures. In the windows. Shadowy, faceless figures watching. "Who are they?" I asked softly. He stopped drawing. Then he turned to me, slowly, with an expression I'd never seen on his face before Cold Ancient. He whispered, "They never left. They live in the red room now." A chill ran down my spine. "What red room?" He pointed to the attic. Not the drawing, the actual attic in our house. We'd never even opened it since moving in. I didn't even have the key to the old rusted lock. But Eli, he spoke about it like he knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards made my skin crawl. At 2:47 a.m., I woke up to whispers. Not from a TV. Not from outside. From inside the house. I followed the sound down the hallway, heart pounding, until I reached Eli's room. His door was ajar, and he was gone. My stomach dropped. Then I heard it above me. Thump, thump, scrape. The attic. I rushed to the hallway and looked up at the ceiling. The attic hatch was open, the wooden ladder extended. That was impossible, I never unlocked it. I climbed up, calling his name in a shaking voice. "Eli? Honey, are you up there?" No response. As I reached the top, my breath caught. There he was standing in the middle of the attic, facing the far wall, mumbling in Latin. The only light came from the moon filtering through a dusty, cracked window. He didn't move, didn't turn around. I stepped closer. "Eli, please come downstairs. You're scaring me." He finally turned and smiled. But it wasn't his smile. Not again. He spoke in a voice that wasn't his. Lower. Older. "I told you, this is where it began. This is where I burned." I stared at him, frozen, not understanding what I was hearing. "Burned?" I whispered. "Eli, what are you talking about?" He pointed at the floorboards. I looked down. And that's when I saw it scratched into the wood beneath the dust, barely visible unless you were looking. Domus Cruenta, and underneath it a name. My name. Amara. My blood ran cold. How did my name get up here? I stumbled back, breathing hard, my heart thudding so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts. When I looked back up, Eli had collapsed. His body hit the floor with a dull thud. I screamed. I don't remember how I got us down from the attic. I just remember the way his small body felt in my arms, heavy, limp, too quiet. I kept whispering his name over and over like a prayer, hoping it would wake him up. "Eli, Eli, please, baby, come back to me." I laid him on the couch, brushed the hair from his face, and checked his pulse. Thank God it was there. Faint, but steady. His eyes fluttered open. "Mom?" he croaked. I nearly collapsed with relief. "I'm here. I've got you." He blinked, confused. "Why am I downstairs?" "You were sleepwalking," I lied. "You scared me half to death." He didn't remember the attic. Latin. The drawing. Nothing. And part of me wanted to keep it that way. But another part, the part trembling inside me, knew I couldn't keep pretending. I sat in my room that night, staring at the photos on my dresser. Eli at the zoo, beaming under a sun hat. Eli with cake all over his face on his 5th birthday. Eli wrapped in my arms the day we brought him home from the hospital. He was my son. Wasn't he? Or was he something else entirely? "You came back from me," I kept hearing those words in his voice. And now, they felt less sweet and more haunting. Had I misheard him all those times? Or had I chosen not to understand? I pulled up the video I'd recorded of him sleep-talking. I hadn't watched it since that first night. But this time, I turned the volume all the way up and slowed it down. I don't know Latin, but the words, when spoken in his voice, chilled me. Domus cruenta focus est, ubi matra mortua est, ubi agnies aetrum veniat. I typed it into a translator. The bloody house is the center, where the mother died, where the fire will come again. Mother? I stared at the screen, heart pounding. My breath caught in my throat. Was he talking about me? Or someone else? I called a therapist the next morning, a child psychologist who specializes in sleep disorders. I didn't mention Latin or the attic. Just said Eli had been sleepwalking and saying strange things. She scheduled us for a session that Friday, but by then it was already too late. That afternoon I picked Eli up from school. He looked pale, distant. I asked if he was okay. He nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the rearview mirror. "Mom," he said softly, "can we move?" I blinked. What? Out of this house. Somewhere else. Please. I felt that icy hand close around my ribs again. Why, baby? Did something happen? He turned to me slowly. There are people in the red room now, and they know your name. I slammed the brakes, the car jerking to a stop in the middle of our street. Cars honked behind me, but I didn't care. What did you just say? He looked startled, like he didn't realize what he'd said. I don't know. That night, I locked the attic hatch with a padlock I bought from the hardware store. I shoved a heavy dresser beneath it. Then I sat outside Eli's bedroom for hours, listening, waiting, holding the baby monitor in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other. Around 3 a.m., the air turned cold. The hallway lights flickered, and then I heard it again. Whispers. Faint, like they were buried behind the walls. I leaned closer to the door, heart thudding in my chest. This time, I understood a single word, one that didn't need translation. Amara. My name. Clear, repeated. Over and over again. Amara. Amara. Amara, I opened the door and burst into Eli's room. He was sitting up in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the corner of the room. Who are you talking to? I asked, voice shaking. He turned to me slowly. His eyes were not my son's. I told them you'd come. Then he collapsed again. No breath. No movement, just like the attic. I held him and screamed, sobbing, begging, please, please come back. And just like that, his eyes opened. He blinked, confused. Mom? It was him again. M.Y. Eli. My baby. But the room? It felt wrong now, like something else had come through. Something that didn't want to leave. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went to the library, not the local one, but the dusty old historical archive in downtown Portland. I needed answers. Not the kind you get from parenting books or sleep disorder articles, but the kind that comes from records, old maps, forgotten news clippings. I had one name. Domus Cruenta. And one question. Has this ever happened before? I didn't expect to find anything. But I did. It was buried in a yellowed article from 1921. A house fire. A mother and child. Only the child survived. The article was short and vague, but something made me freeze. The sketch of the house that had burned down? It was the same one Eli kept drawing. Down to the crooked shutters and the single upstairs window with cracked glass. I pressed my fingers to the photocopy and whispered, knowing the address had changed over the years, but the lot remained. Rebuilt. Sold. Torn down. Rebuilt again. And then my heart dropped. It was our address. Our house. The very ground we lived on had been the site of the fire 100 years ago. The mother's name? Amara Leclerc. Amara. My name. That couldn't be a coincidence. It just couldn't. I rushed home, clutching the printouts in my hands, my brain spinning. None of this made sense unless it wasn't just sleepwalking. Unless Eli wasn't just dreaming. Maybe he remembered. Maybe he was that child. And I was the mother who never made it out. Was I being haunted or relieved? I burst through the front door calling his name. Eli. Silence. I found him in his room, sitting on the floor, clutching something in his hands. A necklace. It was old, tarnished gold, with a faded charm in the shape of a key. "Where did you get that?" I asked, breathless. He didn't look up. "They gave it to me. The ones in the red room. They said it's yours." I stared, my stomach in knots. "Mine?" He finally looked at me. "They said you forgot who you were. But you promised you'd find me again." My legs nearly gave out. I sank to the floor beside him, shaking. "Eli, what are you talking about?" He placed the necklace in my hand, and the moment I touched it, something inside me snapped open. A flash. Smoke. Screaming. Flames licking the hallway walls. A woman grabbing a child and running toward the attic as fire swallowed everything. A memory that wasn't mine but was. I gasped and dropped the necklace. No. 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 This can't be real. Eli watched me quietly. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "They said we failed last time. This time, we have to burn together, or it'll never end." I stared at him, trembling. "Who said that?" He pointed upward, toward the attic. I turned my head, and saw the padlock on the hatch hanging open. I hadn't unlocked it, and I hadn't moved the dresser. Something else had. I don't remember walking up the stairs. I just remember the sound and eerie, humming chant seeping through the ceiling like smoke. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was patient. Calling. The attic door creaked open as if it had been waiting. The ladder was already down, the cold air spilling into the hallway like a breath from the grave. "Stay here," I told Eli, but he grabbed my wrist. "No," he said firmly. "If you go alone, they'll take you again." "Again?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "What do you mean?" He just looked at me, with the kind of sadness no child should ever wear. I didn't ask for more. We climbed together. Step by step, the chill grows sharper, the darkness pressing in tighter, and then we reached the top. The attic was not how I remembered it. It wasn't dusty or cluttered anymore. The old boxes and broken chairs were gone. The floor was bare, clean as if newly swept. And in the center of the room, a circle of ash. Inside it, burned into the floorboards, was a name. My name. From 100 years ago. "I don't understand," I whispered. But deep down, I was starting to. Eli walked into the circle. "Wait." I grabbed for him, but he stepped just out of reach. "They said this is the only way. You have to remember all of it." The air thickened. Shadows in the corners began to shift. Move. And then she appeared. Out of the dark. Out of the wood itself. A woman, draped in blackened silk. Her face half-burned. Her eyes sunken with grief. She didn't walk, she floated, swaying like smoke. She looked at me and smiled. "You came back." My throat tightened. "Who are you?" "You were me," she whispered. "You left me in the fire. You said you'd come back for the boy. But you forgot. You chose to forget. I didn't." My voice broke. "I didn't know. I didn't remember." Her face twisted in anguish. "You broke the promise. And now, we burn again." The attic door slammed shut behind us. Wind roared from nowhere, circling like a cyclone. The shadows screamed. The walls shuddered. Eli screamed, too, covering his ears, backing into the circle. "No! Stop! She didn't mean to forget." I turned to him, terrified. "Ellie, what do I do?" He pointed to the necklace around my neck, the one I hadn't even realized I was wearing again. "You have to remember what you said before the fire." The memories hit me all at once, running through the smoke. Holding him, telling him, "I'll find you again, no matter what it takes, I'll come back for you. And I hadn't. Not until now. Tears streamed down my face. I'm sorry, I said, facing the woman the past version of me. I forgot, but I'm here now. I remember. I remember everything. The shadows paused. She stepped closer. Our faces were inches apart. And at that moment, I saw it. She wasn't angry. She was heartbroken. You left him alone in the fire, she whispered. Don't do it again. I won't, I vowed, voice cracking. Not this time. We'll finish this together. The attic flared with light. Blinding. White hot. I threw my arms around Eli. The heat rose like the fire had returned, but we didn't burn. We glowed. And then silence. Darkness. Stillness. When I opened my eyes, the attic was empty. The ash was gone. The circle had vanished. The name was no longer burned into the floor. It was just a normal attic again. And Eli? He looked up at me with tired eyes. Is it over? He asked. I didn't have an answer. But for the first time in weeks, I felt warm. Real warmth. Not fire. Not fear. Something else. Maybe forgiveness. It's been 3 weeks. Eli hasn't spoken Latin in his sleep since that night. No more drawings. No whispers. No shadows crawling through our hallway. The house is quiet now. Almost too quiet. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, expecting to hear that eerie voice echoing from the attic. But it never comes. Instead, I find Eli curled up peacefully beside me, breathing softly, his small hand clutching the key-shaped charm from the necklace we found. He says it keeps him safe. I haven't taken mine off either. I tried to talk to a therapist, but what do you say? I think my son is the reincarnation of a child who died in a fire a century ago, and I might have been his mother back then. Yeah. That went about as well as you'd imagine. So I stay silent. But I feel different. I walk through the house like it's sacred now. Not haunted. Not cursed. Just ancient. Like the walls carry memories I finally understand. Eli seems lighter too. Brighter. Like something heavy has finally been lifted off his little shoulders. He plays again. He laughs again. But he's not the same. Neither am I. One afternoon, I found him sitting by the window, staring out at the trees with a look far too old for his age. What are you thinking about? I asked gently. He didn't answer right away. Then he looked at me and said, She's gone now, the burned lady. She said thank you before she left. A chill ran down my spine. And you're okay? I whispered. He nodded. She was just lonely. She waited a long time for you to remember. My throat tightened. I'm so sorry it took me so long. He smiled, soft and sad. It's okay. You kept your promise. I walked out of the room, heart full of emotions I didn't know how to name. Grief, maybe. Relief. Love. A sense of something ancient finally being made right. That night, I lit a candle in the attic, not to summon anyone. Just to remember. I placed it in the center of the room where the ash circle used to be. I whispered her name, my name, one last time. And I said goodbye. The flame flickered once and then steadied. Peace. That's what I felt. For the first time in forever, I thought that was the end. But a week later, something strange happened. Eli brought home a drawing from school. Look, Mommy, he said proudly, handing it to me. I drew our house. It was sweet. Crayon lines, crooked roof, a smiling sun. But in the attic window, he'd drawn a face, half-burned, watching. I froze. Eli? Who is that? He blinked. That's not our attic. I stared at him. What do you mean? He leaned in close, whispering like it was a secret. It's the next house. I forced a smile. What is the next house? He shrugged. But his last words still echo in my mind. They haven't remembered yet. The end fire.